Welcome to the Running Channel podcast with me, Andy Badley, sitting to my left, Sarah Hartley, and just over there, grinning from ear to ear because he gets to flex his journalistic muscle, the only kind of muscle he has this week. It's Rick Kelsey.
I was wondering where that was going. Yes, and you know that I love a debate. Yes. And there is no bigger debate than this. It is doping in running, and we have a great guest.
Yeah, so you're getting rid of me for this episode, which I'm just about okay with, but you are replacing me with someone who is so knowledgeable in this. So you're both going to be chatting to The Guardian's chief sports reporter, Sean Ingle, and he's joining you as I get booted out. What a shame.
How do you feel about that?
I feel okay. I mean, I've got the first bit of the podcast, so you're not getting rid of me quite yet. We've still got the catch up. We still need to talk about your challenge. We still need to talk about the extra episode that we recorded this week.
What about him? He did something quite big.
And Andy ran a half marathon.
No.
Right.
Was it a half marathon?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Well, we should give a little bit of preamble though. Sean is an incredible journalist. He's been covering running and multiple other sports and doping, specifically in running, for probably over 25 years. I've got my own take on my experience of doping in the elite running world.
And Rick's interviewed the last 10 prime ministers. So
yes.
As always, he will provide all the knowledge you will need. Let's get into it.
Now, don't put yourself down, Sarah.
Right.
Because Andy may have run a half marathon in Nottinghamshire. I may be training for a 5k PB, but you also ran quickly.
Yes, I wanted to say...
You were very cross that we weren't going to talk about you, so you've shoehorned this in.
Yeah, Owen's written the notes here for the episode, and Rick gets to talk about his 5k, Andy talks about his half marathon. Sarah, what does Sarah do? Sarah leaves for the whole episode.
The stage is yours.
This week, I ticked off a bucket list goal of mine since moving out from London into Hertfordshire. I ran the entire Letchworth Greenway loop.
I thought it was going to be coming to my house for afternoon tea.
No, that's on the other list.
Right.
I thought you were going to
list.
I thought you were going to say you featured on a BBC documentary about moving to the country.
I did also do. It's been a big week for me, guys. But no, I ran the full loop, which actually ended up. I had a bit of
just over half marathon. Is that right?
Well. So I ran it with my friend Katie, and it ended up being 20.7 kilometres. And I just went off her direction because she's ran that loop thousands of times. So either she's cutting some corners, likely. We definitely did take a few little turns, or
I'm wrong because I haven't run it for a long time.
Yeah, it depends. I've looked at loads of different GPX files for it, and it all looks a bit different. But the joy of having a loop that long is so good.
Yeah, and not having to repeat yourself. Not having to do an hour and back is magical.
It's like gravelly groomed trails, slightly up and down. There was one bit, we did walk one hill because I was slightly losing the will to live, but it was lovely. And I've been slowly upping my distances. And a few weeks ago, I did a 24k run and honestly thought I'd just lost whatever skill I had to be able to run long distances. But the Greenway loop that I did felt so much better.
Well, also when you did that 24k, you weren't planning on doing 24k. You were running at a pace which is actually a little bit faster than your comfortable pace. It was also hilly.
The same pace.
Yeah, but really hilly. The one that you've just done at the weekend wasn't that hilly,
Less
was it?
hilly,
So there we go.
Yeah. So I'm back, guys. Now you can talk about yourselves.
Okay. Well, we're going to do a full debrief in the race video that we filmed of my half marathon. I've been building up to this for a long time. And the main insight that I'll give you is I genuinely think that half marathon that I ran yesterday at this time of recording was harder than my marathon.
No way.
It's taken more out of me than the marathon,
Why?
I think it's because this time I was really gunning. That was right at my red line in terms of hopefully not beyond it, but for a very long time I was running as hard as I could run.
The pace was I can't even comprehend how fast that 3:30 per kilometre, wasn't it?
For the middle, so from 5k to about 16k, 17k. Yeah, I was averaging very close to 3:30.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely disgusting.
The wheels, don't want to give away too much, I suppose, but the result is out there. You can see what happened. The wheels came off a little bit in the last 3k.
Which I personally think is more interesting because I think sometimes Andy comes across a bit like a machine. Do you know what I think?
I know what you mean.
And it's a bit like, oh yeah, he's done it again.
Yeah.
He's just run really fast.
Well, it's like when you failed at your 5k attempt.
Yeah, let's use the F word.
It was
quite harsh.
When Sarah didn't quite achieve what she set out to do the first time around.
It was reassuring to the rest of the world.
I think it makes it more interesting.
It doesn't work out every time.
Yeah.
No. Well, how are you genuinely? Because so you set yourself an ABC target.
Yes.
One of those targets was achieved.
Yeah.
One of them wasn't.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
Well, not great that I didn't hit. So I didn't break 75 minutes. Are we able to say that? I don't think that's spoiling anything. But that was my target. But the weird thing was that target was kind of thrust upon me. It was what we talked about last year. Yeah. And then I felt like I'd got a little bit less fit. And then this year I was like, right, I'm going to do a half. I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to go as far inside 80 minutes as possible. The next thing I know, there's a YouTube video being published called I'm training for a sub 75-minute half marathon. And you guys kind of thrust that target. Yeah. But then I started to believe the hype. But there was this big part of me that felt the pressure and wanted to achieve it and thought actually from the training I was doing, I was going to be pretty close to that. Mm-hmm. But then there was also still a part of my conscious or subconscious was like, I'm not sure I can do this.
Okay.
And it messed with my head. We'll do it more in the full debrief, but it messed with my head that one, I was in Ks on my watch and my pacing was absolutely perfect for what I'd planned.
He's so modest.
What is the pacing?
So I planned to start the first 5K slightly slower, but so the average pace that you need to run a sub 75 minutes is 3:34 per kilometre.
My God, I need a drink of water.
And I planned to start at 3:45, cut down for the first 5K to get to race pace. So effectively I knew I was going to be giving away 40 seconds or so in the first 5K.
Yeah.
Then run at race pace for the next 10K and then try and squeeze it a little bit and get that time back towards the end. Though
I love that pacing strategy, and that's sometimes when you have the best races ever if it pays off, but it's also a huge risk.
Yeah, and that I felt really good, but then I was in Ks on my watch. There were only mile markers on the course, no K markers.
Oh,
and then I was trying to do the maths as I was going, and I was the mile markers were telling me that my watch, you know, like the classic thing where my watch would beep for, say, actually the closest one is 16K probably, because that's 16.1K will be 10 miles. So you know that I knew that after about 100 meters after my 16K beep, I should get to 10 miles.
Yeah.
But it was miles after.
Oh,
like
really?
a couple of minutes after, or certainly 90 seconds or so after. And I was thinking, so not only am I battling my own watch and my own pace demons, I was like, have I lost, a minute or so here just through the drift of my watch or whatever?
And where were the mile markers?
But then I finished the race and my watch said 21.1 kilometers.
Yeah.
So I just should have ignored the mile markers and trusted my watch. So that got on my head.
I do think that is a big thing, especially it doesn't even matter like the size of the race, I would say, or necessarily like the accuracy of the mile or kilometer markers. 9 times out of 10, it will have to be placed somewhere for like efficiency or like for safety or for
they have to actually physically attach it to a tree or something.
There has to be a lamppost. And the chances of that lamppost being exactly 10 miles somewhere. So I feel your pain. I've had that before.
Big shout out to Freddie. Any long-term viewers of the running channel will know Freddie accompanied me on my Valencia marathon, so he gets to share these like pretty big emotional moments for me, because he's the one that's fast enough to keep up. And
how was because Freddie in the marathon was running the last kind of kilometre backwards essentially to film.
He was definitely closer to his limit on this, but still he was annoyingly comfortable. I think if I'd been able to close as hard as I wanted to and not, because I did lose over a minute in the last 3 or 4 kilometres, then I think he'd have been closer to his limit. But as it was, he was giving me wonderful encouragement, but I had cramps and all sorts of stuff in those last 3K that I just couldn't make myself go any faster.
Gosh, this
well,
sounds
that's good because we like Freddie and we want to keep using him. So we've got a few years left before we have to tell Freddie to train for these things.
Yeah, I said to someone the other day, I knew this wouldn't happen, but there's this small part of me that was just having when you visualize success.
Yeah.
That like
is success Freddie having to drop off?
Yes.
Oh gosh.
So mean.
In my mind, it was like imagine I get to like 3K to go and I'm on to absolutely smash this thing and Freddie just can't keep up with the camera.
Has to pass
and
you.
Yes, that's exactly what I was envisioning. I was like, I was just imagining him going, go on without me, Andy. And me going, pass me the camera. And me just being like,
to be fair, I think, so I'm pacing Tom this weekend for a half marathon. Yeah. It was supposed to be Owen, but he's injured and me and Tom are both unhappy about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's his dream too.
Yes.
One day that I'll be like, go on.
Yeah, go without me. Just leave me.
Carry on. Rick, you're also gearing up for something very exciting this week.
Yeah, and I have been relatively concerned about it because I don't think I actually am in 5K PB form, even though you think I am. Mm-hmm. Just because holiday threw me out of kilter. I am following a training plan. And one thing I've really been working on is not meatloafing my first kilometre.
Is that a Bat Out of Hell reference?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
You know,
it's not an expression, is it?
Because it's so.
It is for runners. Meatloafing the first kilometre. You know, when you get out on a race, you meatloaf the first bit.
But has anyone in the rest of the running world ever used the phrase meatloafing?
No, going off too fast is what you're talking about.
Yeah, you meatloaf it. Yeah.
Right. We'll let him have it.
I've been trying to stop myself doing it.
From banana bread.
Would you? Would you do anything? Would you do anything for running? But you won't do that.
I won't do that.
Sarah's got no idea what we're talking
I
about.
have no idea. I'm just going to stick with the cake.
The song I'd do anything for love, but I won't do that was number one for about a year.
Ages, yeah.
In the
Right.
90s.
All right. So when you Victoria sponge it, what do you want to happen?
Well, I've been trying to be more. You're going off kilter here.
Sorry.
Right. I've been trying to be more disciplined.
You want a Bakewell tart? That opening.
Yeah, Bakewell tartar.
Don't go down this avenue
So
again,
one of the
guys.
workouts that I did was basically running at PB pace. 5 times 1 kilometre at 4 minutes 30 pace.
And you said you
And
had
running
this
the
workout.
recoveries.
Yeah, and you said
And
you were a bit worried about
massive confidence boost.
Yeah.
Massive confidence boost.
And do you
'cause
remember
I
what
am
the
a bit-
paces were? Was it all bang
4
on?
minutes 30.
On the
See?
money.
Well, it was a bit slow and a bit fast. I was within 5 seconds.
Oh, good.
So
But-
good.
So, by the way, I'm absolutely willing to accept within 5 seconds of pacing. Sarah, on the other hand, will lose her little mind if someone is
how close
3
do you need to
seconds.
be?
I was 3 seconds too fast on
Ruined
the
that.
first kilometre of
Ruined
her
that race
5K when I was
for me.
pacing her, and she
That's-
really.
Yeah, how did you pace your half marathon
You
at the
wanna see
weekend?
someone for
Did
that?
you start off too fast or too slow?
I was supposed to run 3:45 for the first kilometre. I think I ran 3:42.
Yeah,
So
and
3 seconds too fast.
No,
again.
I'm sorry.
I can't believe
But if
you're even debating
if
this.
your red line race pace is 3:30 and you're easing into it,
Yeah.
that's quite nice, isn't it? If my red line
3
is 4
seconds.
minutes and you run 3:57,
But we'd agreed the pacing.
that's just setting
You
me
were
up
fine.
to
You were
fail.
fine.
isn't
That's
it?
absolutely.
You were fine.
Look how
That is
annoyed
fine. That is fine. Yes, we'll see how we go.
You meatloafed that.
I did
They meatloafed it,
that,
yeah.
You cherry bakewelled it.
I see. I love the fact that you. So when I was going to make a joke about it, you've gone down the food route because meatloaf sounds like a food. I don't know. I was thinking like you've take that, or you've NSYNC'd that or something.
Oh yeah, you've S Club 7 that
Yeah,
one.
yeah, exactly. So I feel better because I did that workout. But I
Good.
do think it's going to be very close, and I think I'm probably just off the money.
No, I think you're on the money. I think you just need to back it. You've trained hard for this.
I'm so confident that you can do this.
Yeah. And do you know why as well?
It would, but to put it into perspective, from where I'm running at the moment, it would need to take 45 seconds off, which is a lot in
But
5K.
I think
5K.
this is the thing, especially for 5K, is that if compared to longer distances like 10K, half marathon, you don't actually really ever get that like long sustained effort at race pace within a training block. It's more kind of bitty. So I think it's perfectly normal to feel like this. But I guarantee it'll be out and, well, it won't be out by the time this comes out, but we'll reveal who's pacing you. Steph Davies, phenomenal Olympian. If you let her pace the first kilometre, I have no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, so
if you pace the first kilometre, you will be off the money.
Yeah. No chance.
So just follow Steph.
Yeah. Just stay behind.
Yeah.
To let someone else do their job.
Yeah.
So
Steph is going to chocolate cake you in. So amongst all of your training, we kitted you out with a new bit of tech, which might have been a stupid decision by us, but
after one thing that Rick is capable of handling, I think it might be cameras.
yeah,
So,
well, there's one button on and off.
Yeah.
Tom did all the settings for you.
So Rick's waving it around now. So this is part of Rick's challenge. You have got the Insta360 GO Ultra, which is a brand new camera. We do a lot
Shove
of
it.
filming
There you
out.
go. Nice and tight.
We're hoping that the
Right
editor's
Right in your
going to
face.
the editor's going to use the footage that Rick's capturing right now in the video. So if you are watching this on YouTube, then that's what you get to see.
And Rick is actually holding a camera, but one of the best things about this is that you didn't have to hold it when you went out and tested it.
Yeah, that's
and
true
ran
because it's a
with
bit of a prima donna about this, isn't
Yeah,
it? So he was
this
happy.
is technology has moved on to Rick's way of life, which is not having to hold or worry about anything.
Well, unbelievably, this thing was light enough that I could clip it to my cap beak.
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 Yeah.
You mean
Beak. It's
peak.
definitely not a beak.
It is a beak.
It's a peak.
I've always called it a beak.
Well, that doesn't make it right.
It looks like a beak. It looks like a beak.
It does look like a beak, to be fair.
Owen, have you always called the front of a cap? It's beak.
Yeah, Owen
peak.
said peak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's beak. It's
But
a beak.
so the camera, it is magnetic as well. So there are lots of different ways that you can attach this to yourself. It can go on the peak of your hat. It can go on a head
It can be a
strap.
peak
It
as
can
well.
go on a chest
Yeah.
mount.
Yeah.
It also comes with like a little necklace. So you can just mount it anywhere magnetic as well, which is quite nice. But I think one of the best things that I love about what we do is that we are able to document our runs and then watch it back. And I always love doing that. Like
Yes.
every single marathon I've ever run is somewhere on the running channel.
Yeah, there's two sides to it. I felt quite a lot of pressure being filmed throughout my half marathon at the weekend. But as Rick balances this and passes it to Sarah while he gets all of his sort of straps, he's got a head strap, he's got a chest mount, all that sort of stuff. And then it pops out of its body mount.
And it's
so
just
you've got this
so
tiny little thing.
Yeah. But I just think, I think if you've never kind of documented, people always want kind of photos of their runs. I just think it's so nice to be able to take stuff out on your run and remember it, especially like trail runs. It's so fun.
Also, there's a whole challenge that we've shot using these cameras. You can get that brilliant kind of Terminator 2 running shot from your chest where you get the arms coming into shot.
Completely hands-free. You can even see your hands in the shot.
I genuinely forgot that I was wearing it.
Yeah, how did it feel to run with it?
Did you actually manage to use it though? Here's the main point of Rick's challenge is that you're rubbish at this stuff.
Yeah.
So
Say it like it is.
Yeah.
Well, maybe let's insert some footage now.
I turned it on.
Yeah.
I went for a run, and I got to the end. I turned it off.
Yeah.
I got all the footage, and it's gone into a film. So great.
Yeah, job done.
So yeah,
I would count that as a win.
It was really light, and it clipped onto my peak/beak.
Well, there we go.
Maybe people should email in. Where should we send Rick next with his little camera?
So yeah, I mean, a massive thank you to Insta360 for sponsoring Rick's challenge this week.
Yeah.
And
for allowing us to bring footage to you of Rick struggling at life, which I think really is the main aim of the running
and a little
channel,
behind the scenes close up of like how we're sat in the podcast.
Yeah, you can actually see more of the set.
Yeah, producer Owen over there.
Oh yeah, here you go. You might have never seen that. This is what we get to look at. Unfortunately for us.
The trick with the challenge was to try and run exactly a mile, and whoever runs exactly a mile without any GPS, without a watch, was the winner.
Yeah.
You got 3 attempts, but it wasn't the closest of the 3 attempts. It was you had to stop when you think you'd made your best effort.
Yeah, it was like stick or twist in gambling.
Yeah.
Like,
so if you think you did it really well on the first go, you had to accept that or move on.
And once you've moved on, it scrapped the previous effort.
Yeah. So let's just say one of us nailed it.
Oh, look at his little face. Look at his little pink face. Sticking with the theme of talking about things that you love. Mm-hmm. This week's Running Channel Club extra episode for members was all about cross-country running, which I found fascinating because both of you were able to relive your childhoods.
Yeah, I mean, if you like cross-country or have not tried cross-country, it is a great listen this week because it's kind of... It got me going again for the cross-country season and made me think, oh, you know what? Wouldn't it be quite nice if we all went and did a meet together?
Yeah, I thought about bringing some deep heat in just for the...
Yeah.
and just rub some mud on ourselves to make the studio smell
I think we should all go do a cross-country race together, though.
And we talked about Andy's fantastic days of running on snow-capped peaks around Edinburgh.
Yeah, and at that race in Edinburgh where I ran in the snow, and also I think I raced Mo Farah that day, I was also called for doping control. So immediately after being freezing cold and running through the snow on the hills around Edinburgh, I had to go and pee in a pot in front of a complete stranger to prove that I wasn't cheating in any way, which leads us nicely onto today's episode.
On that note, I will step out and let's welcome in Sean.
Sean, welcome aboard. We're going to be seeing you in Japan next month as well.
You are. I'm very fortunate and I'm really looking forward to it.
It's going to be great.
And we've kicked Sarah out. I've taken her chair. Sean's sat in my regular seat. And then we're going to dive straight into talking about doping.
In 2011, there was a study that looked at 2 major meets, including the World Champs, and it suggested that 57% of athletes were admitted doping.
Yeah, this was the one where it was it was a completely anonymous survey, right? So athletes were given the cover of anonymity and then asked out, have you taken anything in the last 12 months?
Where are we now compared to 2011?
Oh.
That study is contentious, and I know people at the World Anti-Doping Agency would say there are all sorts of flaws with it. However, I was chatting to someone in that agency fairly recently, and I asked that very question, and they thought it was probably around 10%. But that's
so 10% of elite level athletes
of athletes, not necessarily track and field, across sport. And I guess competitive athletes that want to be elite. Yeah. So that in a lot of countries, there is very little anti-doping testing and whatever else. for instance, it's quite interesting that India, which wants to be a powerhouse, I think has the highest number of positive tests at the moment because they've only just started.
But that was like highest number absolute or per capita? Because obviously there's 1 billion people in India. So.
That's absolute.
Absolute, yeah. We're still a bad statistic.
Absolutely. So, and I mean, you speak to other people and they think it's lower than that. I think clearly there has been progress in track and field. That we have athletics integrity unit, which has busted lots of very big names. While in other sports, there was almost no testing. So
has the AIU, the Athletics Integrity Unit, has that almost taken over from WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping Authority, in policing track and field, or are they both doing it?
Yeah,
and in individual governing bodies like we have UK anti-doping in the UK, and then there's USADA in the US.
Yeah, so an athlete can be tested by the individual country, it can be tested by the Athletics Integrity Unit, and then you have WADA as a sort of global head that sort of looks at these tests and says yay or nay, and sort of one of the overriding sort of bodies essentially.
So effectively standardising because this is one of the things. I mean, there's so many points at which we could dive in. I'm going to pick sort of one or two. One is they have to. One of the most difficult things is setting the bar for what constitutes a positive test, probably, because it's so dangerous to have a false positive because you need to have confidence in it. But then that does mean that there'll be people who can effectively game the system and deliberately microdose with a banned substance to take themselves up to this false positive limit. And that's like, and I guess WADA's job is to set what the limit is to a point.
No, I agree. I think if you're looking sort of taking a broad brushstroke approach, I think before, say, 2011, 2012, 2013, it wasn't quite open season because there was testing, but it was even easier to avoid when you were competing, as I'm sure we'll get onto. Yeah. It was much easier for people to cheat. Two things I think have changed in track and field. One, we have the athlete biological passport. Yeah. So essentially, athletes, the top ones, are having their blood tested every so often. And if they are taking big doses of EPO, which boosts the blood, it will show. The second thing I think is, you've got the Athletics Integrity Unit, which does target testing based on evidence it gets and tip-offs. So they will come in people's houses at 6 a.m. and say, can we have a... And often they get people because they don't show up for 3 tests and then they can ban them for a couple of years.
Yeah, so that was my second point, was almost going to be to explain to people how it works for professional athletes on the circuit, anyone that you see in the Diamond League and anyone you'll see at the Olympics or the World Championships. I was part of that anti-doping system. So I had to provide my whereabouts every day, all year, but only for one specific 1 hour slot during that day when I did it anyway. And so you have to, and that's the thing then, if you either haven't filed your whereabouts submission to say this is where I'm going to be by a deadline, or someone shows up during your 1 hour allocated slot and you're not where you say you're going to be, you can't do that 3 times within a year, otherwise you get banned as if you had tested positive, right?
Exactly. And I think it's so hard. People microdose now. So again, you go back to the old days and we see Ben Johnson, he's got these sort of yellow eyes because he's taken...
That's 1988 men's 100 metres in Seoul, right?
Exactly, because he's taken so much of the drugs, steroids, it's turned his eyes yellow. Then you go to perhaps EPO becomes the drug of choice for many distance athletes in the 90s and noughties. I don't think that happens as much anymore, but they microdose, they take small bits. So... And often these drugs leave the body system after a few hours. So you could perhaps take them at 10, 11 o'clock at night and then by lunchtime they're gone. So the testers are hoping to catch them in the morning.
Yeah. On that basis then, how has the world of doping, has it actually got better for everyone, for spectators, supporters and the athletes themselves? Can you trust it, or is the doping just more sophisticated?
I think it's that whole sort of police trying to catch criminals and how far the criminals are ahead. And I think most people would say the bad guys are still ahead, but it's not as lawless as it was a decade ago, right. Certainly in track and field. And I think it wouldn't shock me at all if people are microdosing, but that might give them a few extra meters, whereas before it would give them a lot more.
Because Andy always talks about, so many times in his career, and even, now he's still moving up some of his race rankings because of where he finished, because of people being caught out. And I there's a certain integrity, isn't it, that when we watch what big meets like the World Athletics Championships coming up, you want to be watching it thinking these guys are for real.
Completely. I remember, London 2012 is one of the great examples. I remember watching the women's 1500 metre final, which has been dubbed the dirtiest race in history.
Well, so, and Lisa Dobrisky's in that final, right? And she's a good friend of mine, and she got absolutely hammered for speaking out afterwards, where she just said, look, I don't feel like this was I was competing on a level playing field here. Completely.
And since then, 5 of the athletes, including the gold medalist and the silver medalist, both from Turkey, have been banned, and the gold medalist had already been banned coming into London. The silver medalist had improved her PB in 2012 by 17 seconds, which, we all have improvement. And so it looked farcical at the time. And so there was a Russian athlete who got banned, a Belarusian athlete has since got banned. And I think that really perhaps was the nadir. And you know more about it than I will.
Yeah, there was various things happening during that period that you'd hear about on the circuit and just think, well, that's not fair, but you can't do anything about it. I never had a smoking gun. I never came across any actual doping, and I was never offered anything. But at the same time, you felt like, oh, so-and-so must be. It's quite likely that person's cheating. But then we probably should also, I think, hold our hands up. Maybe this is a slightly more political comment, but I do think now, because of the historical context, there are particular countries where we're almost a little bit holier than thou, like Britain, for example. We do have a very good internal, like UCAD does a great job of trying to police it. But at the same time, there'll be British athletes that have phenomenal performances and everyone goes, that's great, that's a phenomenal performance. But there'll be athletes from other countries that have phenomenal performances and immediately it's like, oh, that person's probably cheating. So there's a little bit of a...
But then some of those countries, it is known that doping is much more widespread.
Yeah, but then...
And have subsequently been banned. Russia, for example, Sean, they're still not competing under the Russian flag, are they?
They aren't, and I did a lot of reporting on this back in the day, and the stories are so sort of unbelievable. You kind of have to sort of scratch yourself and say, is this true? They had an anti-doping doctor called Gregor Rodchenkov, and so
he was made famous in the Icarus documentary,
exactly,
right?
and he would give a steroid cocktail mixed in whiskey for the men and Virma for the woman. It was called the Duchess, and they would swill this and then spit it out, and it made it very hard to detect. And this came about because the Russians had done badly at the Winter Olympics in 2010, and order came from on high. We have to improve, but it got to a stage where at the Winter Olympics in Sochi in 2014, they were passing dirty samples from Russian athletes
that they knew
would test positive in the anti-doping lab. They drilled a mouse hole and they would pass the dirty tube through the sample through the mouse hole. Then they would found a way to adjust it. And
this is fascinating. They found a way to effectively a lot of the anti-doping process, particularly with urine samples. And I think we should probably talk about what actually happens when you go into the room and have to do that. But it relies on those bottles that you seal. And I sealed hundreds of them during my career, being completely anti-tamper. Like you can't open them without breaking them effectively. But the
Russians found a way, and they were able to basically, and they had some previously stored urine samples which were clean, and then in the dead of night they would pass them back round so that when they were then tested by the international authorities in Sochi the next morning, they were clean.
They were clean.
And we found this out sort of from reports from various people, and I sort of chipped in a bit as well. But in 2016, Richard McLaren, who's a law professor, they found access and they had a bunch of whistleblowers. Over 1,000 Russian athletes across multiple sports had been involved in this. And what the Russians did, which was quite clever, they would, every time a Russian tested positive in their Russian anti-doping, it would go to the Ministry of Sport and they would say, do we protect this athlete or do we basically throw them to the walls? So it looked like Russia were actually catching quite a few, but they were catching the bad guys. The bad guys that weren't very good.
That they allowed to catch.
Yeah. And they were letting the good guys that had chance to win medals, they sort of just quietly brushed it aside.
And it was a Russian athlete in the marathon, I think, that was also then being extorted by the IAAF at the time, what became World Athletics. Is that right?
Yeah, this is another absolutely incredible story. So we had Lilia Subakova, who was a major marathon winner, one of the best marathon athletes in the world. She got busted. Now, what would normally happen, of course, is you'd be banned for 4 years. But incredibly, the most senior figures in the IAAF or World Athletics essentially said, you give us money, and it was, I think, $300,000 from memory, and we'll hide this.
You broke the story.
I didn't break it, but I was involved in some reporting around it, and I broke the story that Gabrielle Dolly, who was the basically the head of the head doctor of World Athletics, he was involved. Lamine Diak, who was the president of World Athletics.
Yeah, the people who were supposed to be watching over it.
Yeah, his son, Papa Basata Diak, who was the marketer, he was involved. Yeah, these are supposed to be some of the most senior people in the sport.
It's just depressing. Like when you hear it, when it goes up that high. And I've just been a friend with Andy over the years. I just remember Andy really struggling at times. 2012, obviously he retired in 2017. Just saying, I'm pushing myself to the absolute limit, but I know these guys are cheating. And some of the people that he took on again. And I just remember you just being really... it was almost like you were hitting a brick wall because you were banging... You were like, I'm doing everything I can to be the best in the world, but I can't take on these because they have an unfair advantage.
Yeah, it's conversely like that. That's happening and you're thinking sort of in that way, but also the only way to survive day to day, to get out of bed and train for what you hope is going to be a medal at the Olympics or whatever, is to assume that's not the case and just be like, I can beat these people on my best day. And that did nearly ruin my career in 2011, where I tried almost everything. I was trying extended periods at altitude. I was trying altitude tents and traveling with altitude
you were sleeping in a tent.
Yeah.
I remember coming in your room, thought you were having like a sleepover.
and that just absolutely, I couldn't recover and I massively overtrained. So then I had to try and pull back in time to save my career ultimately at that point. And I did manage to, we stopped, knocked that season on the head, and I came back stronger in 2012. But then, interesting, my experience at the total opposite end to what you're talking about there with the highest echelons of world athletics. I got tested a few times. For example, I remember being tested in the European indoors in 2011. Worst possible, I finished 4th in the final and got called for drugs testing. You think, oh, come on. Like but they have to do, because they have random, they'll test, I think they test the medalists, and then they test, they'll pick one other position. So it could have been 8th, 9th, whatever. And then I went in and you go through this process. So you're in a room. Once they call you for doping, you can't leave the site of the official who has given you that kind of decision that you need to go and provide a sample. So you can't go to the toilet, because the first sample that you provide post-race has to be the one that goes and gets tested, because you could be looking to dilute substances and stuff by overhydrating and so on. So you go into a really small room, not very glamorous at all. The other athletes are there, their agents or coaches might also be allowed in. There's just a big stack of water in a fridge, and then you're just waiting. And I was always massively dehydrated, so it took me ages. So I was often in there for hours. And then there's a big stack of anti-doping kits, effectively, that are the things that get mailed off to the laboratory. So there's these. When you say, okay, I'm ready to go, you then get to pick an A bottle and a B bottle, or you pick this sample, and then it's all sealed in packaging and all that sort of stuff. Then you go into a room, someone watches you into the bottle, and they have to see everything. So it's like trousers around your ankles, maybe t-shirt off or t-shirt lifted up, so that you can't, because in the old days, right,
you can't squirt something into a test tube.
People used to have something in their hand or strapped to their back with and then they'd use tubes that came up underneath, and then they would kind of
mouse holes.
All of that stuff going on. But it's really, they're supposed to watch everything. But at that particular time, and it happened once or twice other than I reported it every single time, they just gave me my box and were like, off you go into the bathroom. And I was like, and I said to them, was someone supposed to come with me? And they were like, oh, we're too busy, or whatever it was they said to me. I was like, well, this is literally the point. And I was like, what? Why am I bothering? Because I could have gone in there. I had clothes on, so I could have had whatever I wanted in my pockets. They just sent me off into the toilet to provide my samples. Obviously, I did it properly and I did everything right and declared any medication that I might have been taking at the time on my form. Then handed it off. But then there's a box for any concerns, and you can fill that in. So that's a very small thing, right? But that's my experience. There must be hundreds of other athletes who've had similar things, and if that's the level, then you just think, well, what's the point?
What you said also was very interesting, how you overtrained trying to catch these guys. I mean, I think of people like Joe Pavey, who was a very good 5,000, 10,000 metre runner.
She went to 5 consecutive Olympics, I think.
Yeah, but she would regularly come 4th to Russians in her peak period. I think of Jenny Meadows is the other one.
Keely Hodgkinson's coach.
Yes.
So she's had that experience of definitely not a level playing field. The number of people that have finished in front of her at major championships and were then subsequently banned, but they weren't banned in a window of time that allowed Jenny to then receive medals necessarily.
100%. And also Jenny was talks about how Charles Van Comrie, who was the head of sort of British athletics before London 2012, sort of coming to her and sort of saying, you need to lose this, you need to do that, you need to lose weight, etc., etc., putting pressure on her when she was, still one of the very best athletes in the world, because she was up against racing against doping cheats.
Sean, what blew my mind actually is the different ways in which the athletes are using illegal sources to dope. So there's anabolic steroids, stimulants, masking agents, and then obviously we mentioned blood doping, but the list is enormous.
Yeah, what was interesting for me, almost to take a step back right to the very beginning, in our notes here, it says that substances and methods are banned if they meet at least 2 of the 3 criteria: to enhance performance, pose a threat to athlete health, or violate the spirit of sport. And obviously that last one is probably the hardest to decide what does actually violate
the spirit of sport.
Yeah, I mean, there's discussions at the moment, and no one knows for sure whether athletes are using Ozempic. Now that,
and that's the weight loss drug,
which is the weight loss drug that makes you not hungry, and it's not currently banned at the moment. But it's on the World Anti-Doping Watch List, and I think there's nothing kind of illegal about it. But clearly, in many sports, if you reduce weight, it can help performance, but it could also be seen as a risk to the athlete's health. So I mean, at the moment, you could take it if you wanted to. I don't know if anyone would, but there's the sort of people.
Well, I mean, power to weight ratio is probably the most important metric in cycling, right? And it's similar in running. You often see people who were quite good runners who then, if they do lose a lot of weight quite quickly, can become incredible runners. But then the difficulty with that is it's not sustainable, because you're more likely to get injured because you've lost weight so quickly. But related to that, thyroid medication is technically not banned, from my understanding, particular types of thyroid medication. But when you look back at the notes and the things that, like during the Balco scandal, which was in the 90s, so Marion Jones, Dwayne Chambers, all of that stuff, all of those guys have their regimen of drugs was public. And my understanding, there were thyroid medication as part of that.
There were.
So clearly that, as part of this cocktail of performance enhancements in the 90s, the peak of doping almost, it does something in terms of cutting weight or like helping metabolism or whatever. But technically that's not banned, but you would need a prescription for a medical condition for it. So that's then the grey area.
Exactly. I mean, there are legal drugs like caffeine that we all take before races, and that's fine. Although it was
is it true that was banned once?
It was once banned at very high levels. Then you have the grey area ones, such as thyroid, which they're allowed with exemption. And then you have the sort of outright bans. But the other thing we sometimes have as well is that sometimes athletes will test positive having taken something from a supplement.
Yeah.
And I know British Athletics and other bodies and UK Anti-Doping will say to athletes time and time again, only buy supplements that say informed sport on them.
Yeah.
And that means if you say you've taken your protein shake and then you test positive, you can say, well, here's the batch number. There's another batch in the building somewhere. They can prove that you're right.
Yeah.
And this cost Britain at the Tokyo Olympics. So CJ Uja, he sort of led the 4x4 relay team home. They won a silver medal. A few days later, he tested positive.
Yeah.
It turned out during the pandemic, he'd bought some vitamins on Amazon, beta-alanine, which doesn't do very much.
Yeah.
Right.
But it had a couple of dodgy stuff in it. So
yeah, ultimately that's an education piece, isn't it? But that is madness. Like, I would never have bought something off Amazon when I was competing. I mean, probably Amazon didn't exist because so long ago. but yeah, that's an interesting question. Then is ultimately we were always told you're responsible for what ends up in your body. So therefore, if you are going to take any supplements, then you can mitigate the risk by making sure they're tested by this body. But then if something did happen and you tested positive, it's still on you if you've eaten or ingested something. There's lots of stuff about contaminated meat, contaminated supplements. But I thought we were still liable, and I knew athletes at the time who actually ended up getting tested positive for these contaminated supplements, and they still had to serve a 1-year ban or a 2-year ban, even when they could prove to the Court of Arbitration for Sport that they didn't mean to. So why did Yannick Sinner in tennis only get 4 months? I know this is a slight aside, but...
Well, that's interesting. I've spoken to a number of people about that as well. Essentially, the World Anti-Doping Agency accepted that he knew nothing about his massage therapist massaging him having had some sort of, used a dodgy something on his cut, and they accepted his explanation. However, he still had to get some sort of ban because under World Anti.
So it wasn't, he didn't put something into his body, someone else did, right?
Someone else did. They accepted that and they were able to show the receipts. I know not everyone believes it, but a couple of people I trust think this, they do believe him. But because in sport there's something called strict liability, as you say, you're responsible for what's in your body, they had to give him a small ban to sort of prove the system, keep the system going, because otherwise you would then have everyone else would say, "Oh, it wasn't me; it was my masseuse that did this."
Yes.
So they had to give him some sort of ban, but it was a very limited one.
So are supplements now then the biggest problem with doping? Do you think?
I mean, no. I mean, because if you are taking informed sport supplements, there shouldn't be an issue because you can prove that it wasn't your fault, and therefore you wouldn't be banned. I think the biggest issue is is microdosing, and there is just not the money to have. You can't just be urine testing, which is not very scientific. You can there are better tests, testing blood. There's something called a carbon isotope test, which is much more expensive, but it sort of nails much for longer. But there's a steroid in the urine system. But so it's money, I think, is the biggest problem, because you need people who are investigators. You need kind of ex-coppers. You need people that aren't just going to, at a race, test for urine, because if you're smart, you won't be positive when you race.
Yeah, that's what blows my mind now sometimes, is when people do get caught in competition tests or something like that, which is not that often. But when it does happen, you think, well, there's an assumption from me that to be able to avoid testing for a certain amount of time, it'd have to be incredibly sophisticated. You'd have to plan around, but then to get caught in competition, you think, well, maybe it's less sophisticated than I imagine, and that's a pretty stupid thing to do.
I know people at the Athletics Integrity Unit, and they're the guys that basically police doping in track and field, and they would accept that they haven't got they're not super sophisticated, but they do a lot of smart things well. They act on tip-offs. I think Andy, and I'm sure Andy will back me up on this, most people in sport have a sense of when people are cheating and when they're not, and they're not always right. But the number of times people have said to me in the sport, I don't trust this athlete. One example, Mohammed Katir, who's now been banned. He was a 1500 meter, 5000 meter runner, a very, very good one. But he burst onto the scene from almost nowhere, and people I trust were saying, we won't trust this. And
and a lot of the trust and conversations like that, it does come down to being very careful not to mention anyone specific necessarily, but agents and coaches and stables of athletes where there are multiple positive tests, and you just think there's got to be some kind of facilitation there, like the athletes. And also sort of related to that, from my experience, even when I've thought someone might have been cheating, I've still seen those people train necessarily, and people training incredibly hard, they're just getting an advantage through. So it's not like there's a shortcut where you just chill out and take loads of drugs and become amazing at running 10,000 meters. But yeah, it's hard to know where the buck stops, or where who's sourcing it, who's connecting different people in the athletics world, and agents and coaches in athletics are so influential.
Agree. I mean, that's why actually in America there's something called the Rodchenkov Act, named after our famous Russian doctor turned whistleblower, and that allows the US authorities essentially to sort of do stuff that allows them to try and chase down agents, whoever else, and the World Anti-Doping Agency is very against it. However, it's already sort of yielded catching a Blessing Okunbare, who was a very top sprinter. She was Nigerian, but she was training in America, and that allowed the American feds to sort of get involved. So
this kind of gives me hope, Sean, listening to you, actually, because I hearing so many stories from Andy over his years competing, it feels, listening to you, as if things have improved, and actually we should be hopeful about more people being caught out when they are doping.
I think it's better than it was definitely 15 years ago. I think you never know if someone's doping or not unless you perhaps live with them. However, I would be pretty confident someone like Keely Hodgkinson, who is the best 800 meter runner in the world, is clean. I know her coaches, Trevor Painter and Jenny Meadows, who was mentioned earlier, very well. Jenny was also always incredibly outspoken about doping, was always done things the right way. And if Keely can do what she can do, it gives me absolute hope. At the same time, the number of say marathon runners that have been tested positive down the last decade, it does make you think, there's always that bit in your head, like, can I trust every performance? Of course you can't, but I do think it's better now than it was.
And maybe I'm not saying that no one, because people are always going to cheat, right? People are going to find a way it's human nature, I think. But perhaps the cheating has shifted slightly in terms of proportions of athletes to the roads because of the money that's available on the road. Whereas actually it's quite hard to make money as a track athlete, certainly in the distance events, because above 800 meters, you don't necessarily get a lane. So just for clarity, like if you're in a laned event, say the 400 meters and down, or most of the field events at a Diamond League, everyone's going to get prize money because you finish in the top 8. But when I was competing, if you weren't in the top 8, and bear in mind there's 14 or 15 guys in the 1500 meters most of the time, then you didn't get any money at all. So you get your travel expenses paid to go there, but you're not earning any money. Whereas in the road, there's so many meets, even small ones, putting up hundreds or thousands of pounds for people to win relatively slowly. Then the motivation to cheat there, do you think it's shifted?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been to Kenya a couple of times and spoken to lots of sort of people in Kenya and about Kenya. And I remember going there, 2014 it was.
Yeah, I think I trained there 2011, 2012 a couple of times.
And I remember speaking to David Risha's coach, Brother Colm.
Yeah.
And
from the famous school.
St. Patrick's School in Eton. And I sort of said to him about doping, and he said, well, I don't think I think some of the lesser athletes are doing it because they want to get a bit better, but I don't think the elite ones are. And that proved to be incredibly naive, as we've subsequently found out. But I do think Andy's right. If you are a good distance runner in Kenya and you're living a very poor life, if you can enter a couple of minor races in Europe, you could win £5,000-10,000, which is not a lot in athletics, but that could change your life if you've grown up in rural Kenya. And I think that's what a lot of
the temptation is available and it's easy.
Yeah, you go to Eldoret, you go to Eton, and it was very easy to buy EPO back then.
And now I've been reading articles where some sort of investigative journalism has been taking place where they're discovering that, to my understanding, that pharmacists, doctors, etc., in Kenya are actually engaging in almost like what's a revenue share. So the athletes might not actually have the money to pay for the medication, but they're being promised like, okay, well, we'll give it to you if you promise us how many % of your earnings in the next few years.
No, completely. Yeah. The good thing at least is that there have been well over 100 top Kenyan athletes busted in the last sort of decade. And that gives me some confidence. And there's, I mean, it used to be the case there was almost no testing at all in Kenya,
and now that's changing.
So they would only get tested when they competed.
Were they
internationally.
threatened by World Athletics or WADA, wherein they might get the same treatment as a federation as Russia if they didn't invest a certain amount in?
There were definitely some threats. I mean, we're getting into this whole thing whether you would actually be able to ban a country when it hasn't come from the state downwards. I'm not sure. I know there are people.
It's kind of happened though, hasn't it, at the Olympics in Russia?
With Russia,
but that's because they could prove it was state sanctions.
Yeah. I see.
I do know some athletics coaches that think Kenya should be banned.
Should go.
Wow.
Right, we're going to mix things up a little bit this week. Sean's going to stick around because we're going to talk about some big news stories, including one that has pure heart and is about as far away from doping as you can get.
Yes.
But first, we're going to do some questions because this week we've got a question on doping. First question from Agata Milanez. I enjoy listening to you guys during my long weekend runs. Well, you can have an extra long weekend run with this podcast.
Yes, this one has been. We couldn't cut it short. So here we are.
I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on the recent news of Ruth Cheping-Getich's suspension over doping. Was her Chicago world record too good to be true? And was it naive to think that it could have been achieved cleanly?
Oh, it's a tough one, isn't it? She has been provisionally suspended, so it's not. She hasn't actually been handed a formal ban yet. So they're looking into this. But
I would say, I mean, her previous personal best was 2 hours 14. In Chicago, she ran 2:09. She's now 31 years old. That sort of performance at that age raises suspicions, clearly. What's made it harder, I guess, in recent years is we have had super shoes.
Yeah.
A lot of athletes take bicarb powder, which does help as well.
Bicarb powder?
Bicarb, yeah.
So buffers lactate is the principle. So I guess it's the related to the pH in the bicarb.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, you could. It's the same thing you could buy to cook product, but if you took it back in the day, you would have issues, when you ran potentially.
Yeah, you're being very polite. I think a lot of people used to take, like 400 meter runners would take capsules of bicarb that they like almost mixed up themselves when I was running, but it was very, very risky that you might need a poo in the middle of running 400 meters.
Right. But a company called Mertens has found a way essentially of stabilizing this, so you can take it and you don't have any, or most people don't have any issues.
They take it for marathon? I hadn't realised that.
I think it's more shorter distances. Yeah. But essentially what I'm saying is when you're sort of measuring performance, it's hard because I think at the shorter distances, bicarb definitely helps. Super shoes have definitely helped. However, for someone to jump 5 minutes, not had many a history of injuries and whatever else, it raised suspicions at the time. She was questioned about it after the race.
And then she actually didn't test positive for what you'd consider to be a performance-enhancing substance, but it's on the ban list because it's a diuretic. Yes. It helps flush out potentially other substances.
Exactly.
But also the amount by which, we have these limits in place to try to avoid a false positive. But the amount she tested, it was thousands of times over this limit.
Exactly.
This one is from Callum Dinnan in the club, and it's mainly for Andy, but get your take on it as well, Sean. Given your experience as a pro, if you were to take Sebastian Coe's job, what changes would you want to make to the anti-doping regime in an ideal world? And what is a realistic change you think that could be made quickly?
So Seb Coe as essentially the head of World Athletics.
World Athletics.
Because you want to, the main goal for him and for me is I want to watch stuff and not be thinking like, was that the shoes? Have they done something they shouldn't be doing? I just want to watch a pure head-to-head and be like, I'm buzzing for this. So what would I do? Just as an aside, I always think it's interesting that we've described the whereabouts system where you have to describe where you're going to be for an hour a day.
Yeah.
Whenever other sports get asked about this, often I've heard arguments in tennis and football where it's almost like against their human rights to have to tell people where they're going to be every day. That's not how that's right, Sean. I think, isn't it? I've heard that argument from those sports.
But certainly the ones where they're not part of like football, they aren't necessarily, they don't sign up, and the American sports, they don't sign up.
So it feels more restrictive to them.
Yeah.
Whereas I was the opposite. I was like, test me every day. Test like put a GPS tracker on me so you know where I'm going to be, so you can always find me.
Yeah.
Like I don't care if it's middle of the night, wake me up. If I've changed my address at the last minute, because sometimes there are people totally, actually Christina Harugu from Great Britain, she won the Beijing 400 meters for Great Britain, but she had prior to that been like almost the first person that fell foul of the whereabouts system because it was so new. She had changed her training venue at the last minute and like not updated it. And so then she missed 3 tests. But that would never happen, right? And clean athletes, I don't think would mind. I can only speak for myself. That's what I would. I don't know how you would implement this, but I would make myself available 365 days a year, 24/7 to prove that I wasn't doing anything. And like that would give, if I knew everyone was being tested in that way. And ultimately the big thing is that no 2 countries have the same systems in place.
Would that work?
Yeah, I think so. But I think the big thing for me would be more money, more resource. I would say the athletics integrity unit is the best out of any sport. However, it could always do with more budget. Where it gets it from, who knows? But imagine if it has more investigators. Imagine if it has the finances to do better testing. It won't catch everyone, of course, but it will catch more cheats.
Yeah, and then I also wonder whether I don't know how you would enforce this. Like this kind of blue sky thinking, what could you do? But one, the criminal side of it, like that you're talking about in the US, agents and coaches being actually like, whether it's jail time or something, as opposed to just a ban from your sport. Because at the moment, if you didn't care about your legacy and you wanted to cheat for a couple of years at the risk of getting caught and you could make some money, no, you're not going to have to pay it back. And then just disappear off into obscurity, and there's never going to be any criminal sanctions. Like there's not actually a massive deterrent.
Up the sanctions.
Well, yeah, and also there's loads of people who I competed against in championships, in other races, where they've subsequently tested positive, but there's no way of the authorities proving that person was cheating when they did that race 2, 3, 4, 5 years prior to that. But scrub everything. Like, I think you do have to have the distinction, if you can prove absolutely, which is really hard, that someone deliberately cheated, as opposed to like contaminated supplements, and then it becomes a grey area. But if there have been plenty of clear-cut cases, and those people should just they should disappear from the record.
I agree with you, but I think a lawyer at the Court of Arbitration for Sport would absolutely skewer any arguments you and I would have.
For sure.
We'd be bust. But I agree.
Yeah.
Well, there'd be all sorts of human rights arguments involved, and like the fact that if someone, if the ban for something is 2 years and someone served that ban, then they're absolutely free to come back and compete, and that's tricky for me. But that's why I'm not in those positions of power, and I just don't know what I would do, because I'm saying just ban everybody, but at the same time, there must be people who are stuff that's just not their fault.
Yeah.
And so then it's really
But you're right though. If someone has broken a world record and then they're subsequently banned a few months later, it's naive in the extreme to think they weren't cheating while they broke that world record, and therefore that world record is illegitimate and shouldn't stand.
This all comes down to, listening to you two, better testing as well as more
testing, better testing,
better quality testing.
I think from one of Sean's earlier points, my understanding is there are certain tests that can, for example, differentiate, I think, between synthetic and regular EPO, or can look at different testosterone, epitestosterone ratios. But they don't do those tests unless some initial flags are met, because they cost more money. So if you can game the system by not kind of flagging to be escalated, then you would never do those tests that would find stuff.
Right. Let's move on to some news stories, because we've got some
I forgot we've still got this to do.
Right, first news story today. I love this. I love every single thing about this story. A 97-year-old has completed 250 park runs in Belfast. Not only has she done this, she had heart surgery just a couple of weeks ago. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, I've seen the clips of this on social media, and it's incredibly heartwarming.
It's just lovely.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine being that mobile at 97. That blows my mind.
Yeah, she even went out during COVID, was still going to a local park and just doing it on herself in Ormew Park in South Belfast.
Because effectively 250 is 5 years straight without missing one.
Yeah.
And you've got to assume that you missed some, especially if you have heart surgery.
Well, she only started when she was 88 running.
Wow.
and she gets up some speed as well, which is incredible. And she said she's not going to stop. I absolutely love that story. That's great.
Yeah, it gives me hope when I creak out of bed in the morning that I could still be going at 97.
And we should also talk about, we've mentioned her before, but we should talk about completely separately, Keely Hodgkinson, who is back running over a year after the Olympic Games.
370 something days since she won the Olympics in Paris.
Nailing it. How excited are you for her, to see her at the World Athletics?
Oh, I've written a column in The Guardian which argues she is our best sports star in any sport at the moment, I think.
Really?
And I just, to come back, she hadn't run for 376 days. She had 3 separate hamstring injuries. And as a runner, when you've done your hamstring, and then she comes and she runs the 9th fastest time in history. And some of those times above her were set by Eastern Bloc athletes as well. So it's probably even higher. I was chatting to her coach.
And I think she smashed the world lead by about 2 seconds as well. So everyone else has been trying for the last year whilst she hasn't been competing. 156, I think, was the world lead, and then she runs 154. And the common, I've done this as an athlete. It's very unusual to run your best race, first race out. Actually, you were normally a bit rusty, you feel a bit rubbish.
No.
She beat the field by miles, and you've got to think that that's terrifying for everyone else in the world, because she'll get faster, because you're not going to.
What's her secret, Sean?
Well, I think she's obviously incredibly talented, was a very good runner. She's incredibly determined. I think, speaking to her coach, Trevor Painter, yesterday, one of her coaches yesterday, he was talking about how all this rehab she's been doing, she's much stronger now. She's working on her weaknesses as well.
You get forced to do it when you get injured.
Exactly.
And Trevor Painter and Jenny Meadows, who are her coaches, are a couple as well. And Trevor coached Jenny during her career, so it's a pretty cool story.
100%. And he would obviously have known what it's like to coach an elite athlete with Jenny, and he's done it again. And I think she clearly she responds well to the spikes and the Mertens powder as well. But yeah, she's just a perfect 800 metre runner. She's very fast over 400, and she can sustain it.
That's such a big statement. She's Britain's best hope in any sport.
Well, the most talent, I think. I mean, I think you look at Luke Littler in darts, he's great, but he's number 2 in the world. You look at the Lionesses, I think they have obviously done brilliantly, but none of their players are the best in the world. Same with English footballers. I honestly think, in terms of being better than anyone else in her field at a global sport, she's the best.
And she's been consistent over 4 or 5 years as well, because her biggest competitor a few years ago, Athing Mu, didn't make the final in the US trials, so she won't be at the World Athletics Champs either.
Exactly, and she's Mary Moore. She's coming out back and beat, and I just think she's and it's great for as a rider going out in Tokyo. You need people like her for the sport as well, because it will be shown at sort of 2, 3, 4 in the afternoon. Here, I don't know. Track and field needs people like Keely,
her. They need superstars
to break through. And
on that note, who is one athlete we should be looking out for in Tokyo?
Good question. If more broad, I think there's all. I think I'm really looking forward to when Faith Kipyegon takes on Chebet, and that will be over 5,000 meters. Because I think that will be really exciting as a clash. I think the men's 100 meters will be great with Keyshawn Thompson against Noah Lyles and others. From a British perspective, I don't know if there's anyone, because often we like to talk up athletes that are, in their late teens and so on. I don't think there's anyone really. Phoebe Gill, who reached the semi-finals of the 800 in the Olympics, she's been out all year, and I don't think there's anyone that's going to break through for
not like the big surprises, but then there'll be people like Josh Kerr gunning for a medal again. Obviously Keely getting stuck in. So
Matt Hudson-Smith for the men's 400 as well.
Sean, thank you so much for coming in. Hopefully when we're in Tokyo we might grab you for a bit of insight. We won't keep you an hour this time. We'll just grab you in for 5 minutes.
Always happy to run the channel.
Thank you, Sean.